June 29th, 1829, England. Jeanette Ashworth's trembling fingers clutched the letter as her father's drunken confession echoed through Emberwood Hall's crumbling halls. He had wagered her in a game of faro and lost. The notorious Prince Valerius of Aldoria, a man whose cold eyes had earned him the name the Shadow Prince, would arrive at dawn to claim his prize. Outside her window, storm clouds gathered over the estate's withered gardens, mirroring the darkness spreading through her chest. The clatter of expensive carriage wheels on cobblestone announced her fate. And as the imposing silhouette of Prince Valerius filled the doorway, Jeanette raised her chin in silent defiance. 30 days, he stated, his deep voice cutting through the room like steel. That is what your father's debt has purchased me. Emberwood Hall had once been the jewel of the countryside, its gardens lush with roses and its halls filled with laughter and music. Now, like the family that owned it, it was a fading glory, beautiful but crumbling, proud but desperate. Jeanette Ashworth stood at the window of her father's study, watching raindrops trace paths down the glass like tears she refused to shed. Behind her, Lord Percival Ashworth slumped in his chair, reeking of brandy and failure. There was nothing else to be done, he muttered, not meeting her eyes. The debts, they were too great. At 23, Jeanette was no naive debutante. Her mother's death had thrust her into the role of lady of the house at 16, managing accounts that grew thinner by the season. Her father's gambling had accelerated their decline, each night at the tables digging them deeper into ruin. "What have you done?" she asked, though the letter in her hand had already told her everything. The prince offered a solution, Lord Ashworth said, his voice hollow. 30 days in his company, and all our debts erased. Prince Valerius of Aldoria. Even his name sent chills through the countryside. He was not a British noble, but a royal exiled from a minor European kingdom, a man who had earned his title, the Shadow Prince, through ruthless business dealings and a heart reportedly as cold as the stone walls of his castle, Shadowmere Keep. Widowed 5 years prior, under circumstances no one dared discuss openly, he had since become more reclusive and feared. "You sold me," Jeanette stated flatly. "Not a question." "I secured our future," he corrected, finally looking up. His once handsome face was bloated, eyes bloodshot. "He's wealthy beyond measure, powerful, connected. And I am to be his what? His mistress? His plaything? His companion for 30 days only? Then you return, our debts cleared." Jeanette turned back to the window, her reflection overlaying the stormy landscape beyond. She had been raised as a nobleman's daughter, educated better than most women of her station. She spoke 3 languages, played the pianoforte, managed household accounts, none of which had prepared her for becoming currency in a man's transaction. "He arrives tomorrow," her father added softly. Jeanette closed her eyes. "Then I shall be ready." 3 nights earlier, the Gentlemen's Club of West Hollow buzzed with activity. Crystal chandeliers cast golden light over green baize tables where fortunes changed hands with each turn of a card. Cigar smoke hung in lazy clouds near the ceiling, and the clink of crystal glasses punctuated bursts of laughter. At the center table sat Lord Percival Ashworth, his cravat loosened, his face flushed with drink and desperation. Across from him, Prince Valerius observed his opponent with the detached interest of a scientist studying a specimen. Prince Valerius cut an imposing figure even while seated, broad-shouldered and tall, with raven-black hair and eyes the color of a winter storm. He commanded attention without effort. Unlike the other gentlemen, whose emotions played across their faces like actors on a stage, the prince remained impassive, revealing nothing. Another hand, Your Royal Highness? Lord Ashworth asked, his voice slightly slurred. The prince raised an eyebrow. You have nothing left to wager, Ashworth. Your IOUs already fill my pocket. My estate is mortgaged to the hilt, the prince finished for him. I've already purchased those debts. A hush fell over the nearby tables. Prince Valerius was known for collecting failing estates, adding them to his vast holdings. Some called him a vulture, though never to his face. Lord Ashworth's hands trembled as he reached for his glass. I have something else? Something unique. Oh? Mild curiosity flickered across the prince's otherwise stony expression. My daughter, Ashworth said, the words hanging in the air like the aftermath of a gunshot. Someone gasped. The prince's expression hardened further. You would wager your own flesh and blood? His voice was dangerously soft. Ashworth, too far gone in drink and desperation, nodded. Jeanette. She's educated, accomplished, beautiful. Worth far more than what I owe. And what exactly are you proposing? 30 days in your company, under your roof. Ashworth swallowed hard. In whatever capacity you desire. The prince's eyes narrowed. You disgust me, Ashworth. Hope flickered in the older man's bloodshot eyes. Perhaps the prince would refuse such an indecent proposal. And yet, Valerius continued, I find myself intrigued, not by your pathetic attempt to barter your daughter, but by the opportunity to witness just how far a nobleman can fall. He leaned forward. I accept your wager, with conditions. The dealer hesitated, looking between the two men. Deal, the prince commanded. Cards whispered against the table. Lord Ashworth's hands shook as he lifted his cards. A smile spread across his face, the first genuine one in months. 3 kings, he announced, laying down his hand. The prince studied his own cards for a long moment before placing them face up on the table. 4 queens. The room exhaled collectively. Lord Ashworth's face drained of color. I can explain to Jeanette, he stammered. You will explain nothing, the prince interrupted, rising to his full height. I shall arrive at Emberwood Hall in 3 days' time to collect Miss Ashworth. She will remain at Shadowmere Keep for exactly 30 days. During that time, all your debts to me will be suspended. And after 30 days, she returns to you, and your debts are erased. The prince's smile never reached his eyes. Consider it a generous arrangement. He signaled to his man of business, who approached with a small leather pouch. A token payment for your merchandise. The pouch landed on the table with a heavy clink of gold coins. My daughter is not merchandise, Ashworth protested weakly. Agreed, the prince said, donning his coat. She is apparently worth far less to you than that. Prince Valerius arrived precisely at noon, his black carriage emblazoned with the silver Aldorian crest gleaming despite the overcast day. Jeanette watched from her bedroom window as 4 matched black horses came to a halt on the gravel drive, their breath visible in the cool air. She had spent the morning packing a small valise, selecting practical dresses rather than finery. Whatever role she was to play at Shadowmere Keep, she would not pretend it was of her choosing. Miss Ashworth, her lady's maid whispered, your father requests your presence in the drawing room. Jeanette nodded, smoothing her hands over the simple blue dress she had chosen. No jewelry adorned her neck or wrists. She would not be decorated like a sacrifice. The drawing room, once the pride of Emberwood, now showed signs of neglect. Faded patches on the wallpaper marked where paintings had been sold. Jeanette entered with her head high, her step measured. The prince stood by the fireplace, a dark figure against the weak flames. He turned as she entered, and Jeanette forced herself not to falter under his appraising gaze. "Miss Ashworth," he acknowledged, his voice deep and controlled. "I trust your father has explained our arrangement." "He explained that he gambled me away like a broodmare, Your Royal Highness," she replied evenly. The details beyond that were somewhat vague. A flash of something, surprise perhaps, crossed his face before the mask of indifference returned. Lord Ashworth shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Jeanette, please." "No, Lord Ashworth," the prince interrupted. "Let us have honesty between us at least." He turned his attention back to Jeanette. "You will reside at Shadowmere Keep for 30 days. During that time, you will dine with me, converse with me, and accompany me should I require it." "And my other duties?" she asked, the word bitter on her tongue. A muscle twitched in his jaw. "I did not purchase you for my bed, Miss Ashworth, if that is your concern. I have no interest in unwilling women." Relief washed through her, though she kept her expression neutral. "Then what is it you want from me, Your Royal Highness?" "Company," he said simply, "and perhaps the opportunity to demonstrate to your father the value of what he so carelessly wagered." Lord Ashworth stared into his empty glass, unable to meet either of their eyes. "These are my terms," the prince continued, producing a document from his coat. "You will have your own chambers. You will be treated with the respect due your station. You will not attempt to leave Shadowmere Keep until the 30 days are complete. And if I refuse, then I call in your father's debts immediately. Emberwood Hall will be sold, and your father will face debtor's prison." His gray eyes were cold. "The choice is yours." It was no choice at all. Jeanette took the document, scanning the elegant script that detailed her temporary servitude. "Do you have a pen, Your Royal Highness?" He provided one, watching as she signed her name with a steady hand. Lord Ashworth made a small, pained sound. "Your carriage awaits, Miss Ashworth," the prince said, folding the contract into his coat. "Say your goodbyes." Jeanette turned to her father, who finally looked up, his eyes swimming with tears and shame. "I will return in 30 days, she said quietly. "Please try not to lose anything else of value in the meantime." Without waiting for a response, she collected her valise and walked past the prince toward the entrance hall. As she stepped out into the pale sunlight, she made a silent vow. She would endure this arrangement with dignity, but she would not be broken by it. The prince followed, his footsteps heavy on the gravel behind her. Shadowmere Keep loomed against the darkening sky, its gray stone walls and towers seeming to grow directly from the craggy cliff face. As the carriage wound up the narrow road, Jeanette caught glimpses of the structure through breaks in the dense forest, imposing, ancient, and utterly isolated. They had ridden in silence for hours, the prince opposite her, his attention on documents he occasionally annotated. Jeanette had kept her gaze fixed on the passing landscape, refusing to show the fear that clawed at her throat. The carriage finally passed through iron gates and into a courtyard where servants waited in a neat line. The prince descended first, then offered his hand to assist her. Jeanette hesitated before accepting it, noting how his large hand enveloped hers completely. "Welcome to Shadowmere Keep, Miss Ashworth," he said, his breath visible in the chill air. A severe-looking housekeeper stepped forward. "Mistress Thorne, the blue room has been prepared as you requested." "Thank you, Mistress Thorne. Please show Miss Ashworth to her chambers. She will join me for dinner at 8. With that, he strode away, leaving Jeanette to follow the housekeeper into the castle. Inside, Shadowmere Keep was as imposing as its exterior suggested. High ceilings, dark wood paneling, and portraits of stern-faced ancestors lining the corridors. Their footsteps echoed on marble floors as they climbed a grand staircase to the east wing. "Here we are, miss," Mistress Thorne said, opening a heavy door. "The Blue Room." Despite its name, the chamber was dominated by shadows. Heavy curtains covered tall windows, and the blue damask wallpaper appeared almost black in the dim light. A massive four-poster bed stood against one wall, and a fire smoldered in the grate. "His Royal Highness dines promptly at 8, Mistress Thorne informed her. "Lyra will assist you with dressing." She gestured to a young maid who had materialized in the doorway. "Thank you," Jeanette said, setting down her valise. "Is there a library in the castle?" Something like surprise flickered across the housekeeper's face. "Yes, miss, though His Royal Highness rarely permits guests to use it." "I am not a guest, Mistress Thorne," Jeanette replied evenly. "I am a transaction." The housekeeper's lips thinned. "Nevertheless, miss, I suggest adhering to His Royal Highness's wishes. The east wing beyond your chambers is strictly forbidden." After they departed, Jeanette explored her prison. The room was luxurious but cold, like everything else at Shadowmere Keep. She unpacked her few belongings, arranged her books on a small table, and tried to ignore the growing knot of anxiety in her stomach. At precisely 7:45, Lyra returned to help her dress. The girl worked silently, her eyes downcast. "Have you served at Shadowmere long?" Jeanette asked, trying to establish some human connection. 3 years, miss," Lyra answered quietly. "And the prince? Is he a fair employer?" Lyra's hand stilled momentarily as she fastened Jeanette's dress. "His Royal Highness is exacting, but he pays well and on time." She hesitated, not like the previous owner. "You seem afraid of him." "Not afraid exactly, miss." Lyra's voice dropped to a whisper. "But we've heard things about women he brings here. They never stay long, and they never leave the same." A chill that had nothing to do with the drafty castle ran through Jeanette. "What do you mean?" "It's time for dinner, miss," Lyra said, stepping back. "His Royal Highness doesn't tolerate tardiness." The dining room of Shadowmere Keep stretched beneath a vaulted ceiling, dominated by a table that could seat 30, but was set for only 2. Candelabras cast pools of light that barely pushed back the shadows. The prince stood as Jeanette entered, his expression unreadable. "Miss Ashworth," he acknowledged, waiting until she was seated before resuming his place at the head of the table. Dinner proceeded in strained silence, broken only by the clink of silver against fine china. Jeanette ate little, acutely aware of the prince's occasional glances. After the third course was cleared, he finally spoke. "You've barely touched your food. Is it not to your liking?" "The food is excellent, Your Royal Highness," she replied. "My appetite is somewhat diminished by the circumstances." A muscle twitched in his jaw. "You speak very directly for someone in your position." "What position would that be? Prisoner, commodity, temporary companion?" She met his gaze steadily. "I may be here against my will, but I won't pretend otherwise to soothe your conscience." For a moment, anger flashed in his gray eyes. "Your father's actions are not my responsibility." "No, but your exploitation of them is." The prince leaned back, studying her with new interest. "Most women in your situation would be either weeping or attempting to curry favor. I am not most women, Your Royal Highness. So I'm discovering." He took a sip of wine. "Tell me, Miss Ashworth, How does a gambler's daughter develop such fortitude? My father wasn't always as you know him, she said, her voice softening slightly. Before my mother died, he was different, and she ensured I received an education beyond what most consider necessary for a woman. And what use has that education been to you? It allowed me to manage Emberwood's accounts as they dwindled, to read the contracts my father signed without understanding them, to recognize exactly how dire our situation had become. She paused, and to understand precisely what this arrangement means for both of us. Something shifted in the prince's expression, not softening exactly, but a crack in the armor. You may use the library, he said abruptly, during the day when I am attending to business. Surprise momentarily silenced her. Thank you, she finally managed. Do not mistake practicality for kindness, Miss Ashworth. He finished his wine. I simply prefer not to watch you wither from boredom during your stay. The following morning, Jeanette found her way to the library, a magnificent two-story room lined with thousands of volumes. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. For the first time since arriving at Shadowmere Keep, she felt something like peace. She selected a volume of poetry and settled into a window seat overlooking the neglected gardens. Hours passed as she lost herself in verse, almost forgetting her circumstances. Tennyson, a deep voice observed, startling her. An interesting choice. The prince stood in the doorway, his tall frame blocking the light from the corridor. She hadn't heard him approach. He understands loneliness, she replied, closing the book. And the weight of expectations. He moved into the room, his footsteps silent on the thick carpet. You surprise me, Miss Ashworth. I expected to find you plotting escape, not reading poetry. I honor my agreements, Your Royal Highness, even those made on my behalf. He approached a portrait hanging above the fireplace, a young woman with auburn hair and a secretive smile. The frame was ornate, but the canvas itself bore a long slash across the face, as if cut by a knife. Jeanette followed his gaze. Who was she? For a moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. My late wife, he finally said, his voice tight. The Princess of Aldoria. What happened to her? The prince's eyes hardened. She died. And the damage to her portrait? Some things are better left unrestored. He turned away from the painting. The East Wing is forbidden because it was hers. I would appreciate your respecting that boundary. Before she could respond, he was gone, leaving only the lingering scent of sandalwood and the echo of pain in the air. A week into her stay at Shadowmere Keep, a storm descended upon the castle with biblical fury. Rain lashed against the windows, and thunder shook the ancient stones. Jeanette sat in the library, a shawl wrapped around her shoulders against the chill that permeated even the thickest walls. The door burst open, revealing the prince, rain-soaked and scowling. He stopped short at the sight of her. Miss Ashworth, he acknowledged, removing his wet coat. I didn't expect to find anyone here. The storm drove me from my chambers, she explained. The windows there rattled terribly. He nodded, moving to pour himself a brandy from a crystal decanter. After a moment's hesitation, he poured a second glass and offered it to her. For the chill, he said gruffly. Jeanette accepted it with murmured thanks, watching as he took the chair opposite hers. Lightning illuminated his face in harsh white light, revealing exhaustion etched into the lines around his eyes. You're out late, Your Royal Highness, she observed. Estate business. He took a long swallow of brandy. A tenant's roof collapsed in the storm. Were they hurt? Surprise flickered across his face at her concern. No, the family is being housed in another cottage until repairs can be made. They fell into silence, punctuated by thunder and the crackling of the fire. The prince's glass was emptied and refilled twice before he spoke again. Do you know what they call me? In the villages and drawing rooms? The Shadow Prince, she answered honestly. A bitter smile twisted his lips. Yes, cold, unyielding, merciless. He stared into the amber liquid. They used to call me differently. The brandy had loosened his tongue, revealing glimpses of the man beneath the title. Jeanette remained still, afraid any movement might break the moment. What happened to your wife? She asked softly. He flinched as if struck. She betrayed me, he said, his voice raw. With my closest friend. I found them together here, in my home, in my bed. His knuckles whitened around the glass. She claimed to love him, said she had never loved me, that she had only married me for my title and fortune. I'm sorry, Jeanette said, meaning it. The worst part, he continued, as if he hadn't heard her, was that I had loved her completely. I had given her everything, my trust, my name, my heart. He drained his glass. 3 days after I discovered them, she was dead. A riding accident, they said. But everyone believed I had arranged it. Did you? The question slipped out before she could stop it. His head snapped up, eyes blazing. No. Despite everything, I could never have harmed her. The anger drained away, leaving only hollowness. But I understood why they thought it. The Shadow Prince, incapable of forgiveness or mercy. So you became what they already believed you to be? Jeanette observed. It seemed simpler that way. Another crash of thunder rattled the windows. In that moment, with his defenses lowered by brandy and memories, he looked almost vulnerable. Perhaps, Jeanette said carefully. It wasn't her price that was wrong, but that you never saw her true value. Some people are like counterfeit coins. They gleam brightly, but lack substance. The prince studied her face in the firelight. And what is your value, Miss Ashworth? What price should be placed on your company? That's the problem with people, Your Royal Highness. Our worth can't be measured in coins or contracts. She set down her untouched glass and rose. Good night. As she reached the door, his voice stopped her. Jeanette. It was the first time he had used her given name. She turned. Thank you, he said simply. She nodded once and slipped away, leaving him alone with the storm and his ghosts. The gardens of Shadowmere Keep had once been legendary. Formal parterres, rose arbors, and hidden grottos spread across acres of manicured grounds. Now they lay abandoned, choked with weeds and untrimmed hedges. The morning after the storm, Jeanette stood at the edge of this wilderness, a pair of gardening shears borrowed from a surprised groundskeeper in her hands. She began with a small section near the house. A rose garden gone wild, its once prized specimens struggling beneath invasive vines. The physical labor was satisfying, allowing her to channel the confusion of emotions that had been building since her arrival at Shadowmere Keep. By midday, her hands were scratched and her dress smudged with dirt, but a small patch of order had emerged from the chaos. She worked daily after that, weather permitting, reclaiming the garden one section at a time. The gardens became her sanctuary, the one place at Shadowmere Keep where she felt truly free. From his study window, the prince watched her. Jeanette occasionally felt his gaze, but never acknowledged it, losing herself in the rhythm of pruning, weeding, and clearing. On the 10th day, she discovered a stone bench hidden beneath overgrown honeysuckle. After clearing it, she sat down, removing her gloves to examine a particularly deep scratch on her palm. "You should have that tended to," a deep voice said from behind her. Jeanette turned to find the prince standing at the edge of the clearing, his tall frame incongruous among the tangled roses. She hadn't heard him approach. "It's nothing serious," she replied, quickly pulling her glove back on. He moved closer, surveying her work. "You've been busy?" It seemed a shame to let such beauty remain buried. "My wife hated gardening," he said unexpectedly. She complained that it ruined her complexion and soiled her gowns. "Then why maintain such extensive gardens?" "They were here long before her. My mother loved them." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "She would have approved of your efforts." Jeanette studied him in the dappled sunlight. Without his customary scowl, he looked younger. The hard lines of his face softened. "Why did you marry her?" she asked. "Your wife." The question should have angered him, but he merely sighed. She was beautiful, charming. Everyone adored her. He touched a rosebud, gently teasing it open. "I mistook her ability to please for genuine feeling. And now you trust no one. Would you in my position?" His eyes met hers, challenging. "Perhaps not," she admitted. "But what a lonely existence you've chosen," says the woman who spends her days talking to roses. To both their surprise, Jeanette laughed, a genuine sound that seemed to brighten the garden further. After a moment, the prince's lips curved in response. "You should do that more often," he said quietly. "Garden?" He hesitated. "Laugh." Before she could respond, he offered his hand to help her rise from the bench. As she placed her gloved fingers in his, the fabric caught on a thorn, tearing slightly. His thumb brushed against the exposed skin of her wrist, an accidental touch that sent an unexpected warmth through her. Their eyes met, both startled by the sensation. For a heartbeat, neither moved. Then the prince released her hand and stepped back, his expression closing like a door. "Dinner will be served at 8, he said formally, and turned to leave. Jeanette watched him go, her wrist still tingling where his skin had touched hers. 2 weeks into her stay at Shadowmere Keep, the dynamic between Jeanette and the prince had shifted imperceptibly. Their dinners were no longer conducted in strained silence, but filled with cautious conversation. He asked her opinion on books she had read in his library. She inquired about the estate's operations. Neither mentioned the moment in the garden. Yet it lingered between them like an unfinished sentence. Jeanette told herself it was merely the Stockholm effect, developing sympathy for one's captor as a survival mechanism. Yet, in unguarded moments, she found herself watching him, the way his brow furrowed when he concentrated, how his rare smile transformed his severe features. The prince, too, seemed conflicted. Sometimes she would enter a room to find him already departing, as if he could not trust himself in her presence. Other times, he sought her out in the library or gardens with transparent excuses about estate matters requiring input. One evening after dinner, he invited her to the music room, a space she had not yet explored at Shadowmere Keep. "Do you play?" he asked, gesturing to the grand pianoforte that dominated the room. "My mother insisted upon it," Jeanette admitted, "though I fear I'm rather out of practice. Would you indulge me with a piece?" She hesitated, then seated herself at the instrument. Her fingers moved tentatively at first, finding their way through a Chopin nocturne. As she played, she became aware of the prince moving closer until he stood directly behind her, his presence palpable even without touching her. The final notes hung in the air between them. Neither spoke for a long moment. "Your mother taught you well," he finally said, his voice low. Jeanette turned on the bench to face him, suddenly aware of how close he stood. She believed music reveals what words cannot. "And what does your music reveal, Jeanette?" The use of her given name, rare and intimate, made her breath catch. "I don't know anymore," she answered honestly. His eyes darkened as they dropped to her lips. "I should not want this," he murmured, almost to himself. "Want what?" she whispered, though she knew the answer. Instead of replying, he reached out, his fingers hovering near her cheek without quite touching. "You are here because of a debt. Because your father wagered you like property." "Yes." "Then why do I feel as though I am the one who has been captured?" The confession hung between them, dangerous and thrilling. Jeanette knew she should pull away, remind herself of who he was and why she was there. Instead, she leaned forward slightly, closing the distance between them. His kiss was tentative at first, questioning. When she didn't pull away, it deepened, his hand finally cupping her cheek with surprising gentleness. Heat bloomed in her chest, spreading outward until she felt consumed by it. When they finally parted, both were breathing heavily. The prince stepped back abruptly, shock evident in his expression. Whether at his actions or her response, Jeanette couldn't tell. "Forgive me," he said stiffly. "That was unforgivable." "Was it?" she asked, her voice steadier than she felt. "You are here under duress. I promised not to." He broke off, raking a hand through his hair. "This cannot happen again." Before she could respond, he was gone, leaving her alone with the lingering warmth of his lips on hers and a dangerous realization. She wanted it to happen again. The kiss changed everything and nothing. In public, the prince maintained a careful distance, his manner formal to the point of coldness. Yet Jeanette often caught him watching her when he thought she wouldn't notice, his eyes filled with a conflict that mirrored her own. 3 weeks into her stay, Jeanette had established a routine that made Shadowmere Keep feel less like a prison. Mornings in the garden, afternoons in the library, evenings of tense, charged dinners with the prince. The servants had gradually warmed to her, especially after she helped the cook's young daughter with her letters. "His Royal Highness has been different since you arrived, Miss," Mistress Thorne remarked one morning as she delivered fresh linens. "Less harsh." "I doubt I've had any influence on His Grace's temperament," Jeanette replied, though the observation secretly pleased her. "The castle feels alive again," the housekeeper continued. "It's been too long since these walls heard music or saw the gardens tended." That evening, Jeanette descended for dinner to find the dining room transformed. Additional candles bathed the space in warm light, and fresh flowers from her restored garden adorned the table. But it wasn't these changes that stopped her at the threshold. It was the presence of a third person. A woman sat beside the prince, her blonde beauty enhanced by an emerald gown that displayed her considerable assets to advantage. She laughed at something the prince said, her hand resting possessively on his arm. The prince rose as Jeanette entered. "Miss Ashworth, may I present Countess Nadine Beaumont, daughter of the Earl of West Haven." Countess Nadine's assessment was swift and dismissive. "Miss Ashworth, how charming to meet you. Valerius mentioned he had a house guest." The familiar use of his given name was clearly intentional. Jeanette forced a polite smile. "Countess Nadine, I hope your journey to Shadowmere was pleasant." "Valerius sent his finest carriage," the woman replied, turning adoring eyes to the prince. He's always been so thoughtful. Throughout dinner, Countess Nadine dominated the conversation with gossip from London and reminiscences of her previous visits to Shadowmere. The prince contributed occasionally, his manner relaxed in a way Jeanette had never witnessed. He seemed to be performing the role of gracious host and potential suitor with practiced ease. "Miss Ashworth has been restoring the rose garden," he mentioned during a rare lull. Countess Nadine's perfect nose wrinkled. How rustic. Though I suppose one must find ways to occupy oneself in the country. "Indeed," Jeanette replied evenly. "I find honest labor quite refreshing after the artifice of drawing rooms." The blonde's eyes narrowed slightly. "Valerius, you never mentioned how spirited your guest is." "Miss Ashworth has many qualities worth mentioning," he responded, his eyes meeting Jeanette's briefly before looking away. After dinner, the prince suggested they retire to the drawing room. As Jeanette moved to follow, he touched her elbow lightly. "A word, Miss Ashworth." When Countess Nadine had gone ahead, he spoke in a low voice. "Countess Nadine will be staying for several days. Her father and I have business matters to discuss." "Of course, Your Royal Highness," Jeanette replied, her tone carefully neutral. "Though I was unaware you conducted business through daughters rather than solicitors." His jaw tightened. "Countess Nadine comes from one of the oldest families in England. Her connection would be advantageous." "I see." She met his gaze steadily. "You're considering her as your next princess." "It would be a sensible match." "Sensible," she repeated, "like acquiring a new property or investing in a promising venture." Anger flashed in his eyes. "You forget your place." "No, Your Royal Highness. I know exactly what my place is. A temporary diversion until something more suitable comes along." She stepped back from his touch. "I see you've chosen to remain who you were instead of becoming who you could be." The words struck him like a physical blow. For a moment, something like regret crossed his features. Then his expression hardened. "Enjoy the remainder of your stay at Shadowmere Keep, Miss Ashworth. Your 30 days are almost complete." Day 27 dawned with a clarity that belied Jeanette's inner turmoil. Countess Nadine's presence had transformed Shadowmere Keep. The halls echoed with her trilling laughter, and the prince was conspicuously absent from his usual haunts. Jeanette spent the day packing her few belongings, preparing for her imminent departure. "Will you be returning to Emberwood, miss?" Lyra asked as she helped fold dresses. "Yes," Jeanette replied, though the prospect brought no joy. Emberwood Hall meant facing her father's shame and the whispers that would surely follow her return. "We'll miss you," the maid said softly. "The gardens especially." Jeanette smiled sadly. Perhaps His Royal Highness's new princess will continue their restoration. That evening, she was surprised to find only the prince at dinner. "Countess Nadine has departed," he stated before she could inquire. Her father's business proposition proved unsuitable. "I'm sorry to hear that," Jeanette said, not entirely truthfully. "Are you?" His gaze was penetrating. It seemed a sensible match. She echoed his earlier words. A muscle worked in his jaw. Sometimes sense must yield to other considerations. They ate in silence after that, the air between them heavy with unspoken words. Day 28 brought rain that matched Jeanette's mood. She found herself wandering the corridors of Shadowmere Keep, memorizing details she had come to appreciate. The way sunlight filtered through stained glass in the great hall. The worn spot on the library carpet where generations had stood to reach favorite books. The prince found her there in the afternoon, water dripping from his coat. He had clearly been riding. "You're leaving soon," he stated, remaining by the door as if afraid to approach. "The day after tomorrow," she confirmed, "and you'll return to Emberwood." "Where else would I go?" He looked away. "I could arrange. That is, if you wished for a different situation. I have connections." "Are you offering me employment, Your Royal Highness?" she asked, unable to keep the edge from her voice. "No, I only meant—" He broke off, frustrated. "I only meant that you have options beyond returning to your father's house. Thank you, but I'll manage." He nodded stiffly and turned to leave. "Valerius," she called, using his given name for the first time. He froze. Why did Countess Nadine really leave? He turned back slowly. "I told her I could not offer marriage when my thoughts were occupied elsewhere." The implication hung in the air between them, neither willing to grasp it fully. Day 29 arrived with terrible swiftness. Jeanette spent her final evening at Shadowmere Keep in the garden she had restored, watching the sunset paint the roses gold. She didn't hear the prince approach until he spoke. "I've been a coward," he said quietly. She turned to find him standing at the garden's edge, his expression open in a way she had never seen before. "How so?" "I've hidden behind walls of my own making, using the betrayal as an excuse to keep everyone at a distance." He moved closer. "Until you arrived and made those walls seem like the prison they are." "What are you saying?" "Stay," he said simply, "not as part of a wager or contract. Stay because you choose to." Jeanette's heart raced. "As what, your mistress?" "As my wife, if you'll have me." The words she had never expected to hear left her momentarily speechless. "You barely know me," she finally managed. "I know enough. I know you face difficulty with courage. I know you see beauty where others see only ruin." His voice softened. "I know I've never felt for anyone what I feel for you." "Valerius," she said gently, "love cannot be purchased or commanded. It can only be freely given." "I'm not commanding or purchasing," he replied. "I'm asking, hoping." He reached for her hand, and this time she let him take it. Dawn broke on the 30th day, with golden light that spilled across Shadowmere Keep's stone walls, transforming them from forbidding to almost welcoming. Jeanette stood at her window, watching as the grounds came to life. Gardeners tending the sections she had restored, stable boys exercising horses in the paddock. Her valise sat packed by the door, a small collection of belongings that seemed inadequate to represent her time at Shadowmere Keep. How could physical objects capture the transformation that had occurred within these walls? A knock at her door revealed Mistress Thorne, her usually stern face softened with something like regret. "His Royal Highness requests your presence in the main hall. When you're ready to depart, miss." Jeanette nodded, unable to trust her voice. The housekeeper hesitated, then added, "It has been a privilege, Miss Ashworth." The main hall of Shadowmere Keep soared 3 stories high, its vaulted ceiling adorned with frescoes of mythological scenes. Jeanette descended the grand staircase slowly, her simple blue traveling dress a stark contrast to the opulence surrounding her. The prince waited below, his tall figure silhouetted against the morning light streaming through stained glass windows. He turned as she approached, his expression guarded. "The carriage is prepared." "Thank you," she said, stopping several feet from him, her valise clutched in one hand. "Have you considered my proposal?" he asked, his voice carefully controlled. Jeanette took a deep breath. "I have, and I cannot accept." Pain flashed across his features before he masked it. "May I ask why?" "Because a marriage should be built on equality and mutual respect, she said gently, not on a foundation of ownership and debt. I've told you the debt is erased. It's not about the money, Valerius. It's about how we began. How can we build something true when our beginning was so false? He stepped closer, desperation edging into his voice. Then we'll begin again, somewhere else, as different people. We cannot outrun who we are or what brought us together. She reached into her pocket and withdrew a small stack of letters. There's something else you should know. He took them cautiously. What are these? During my time here, I wrote to several influential women in London, patronesses of the arts and sciences who support educational initiatives for women. I've detailed my father's crimes against our family fortune and his subsequent transaction. The prince paled. You mean to expose me? No, she corrected. I mean to expose him, to ensure he can never again gamble away what isn't his to lose, whether money or people. These would cause a scandal that would touch you as well. I'm prepared for that consequence. He studied her with new eyes, a reluctant admiration dawning. You are remarkable, Jeanette Ashworth. I learned strength within these walls, she admitted. Perhaps not in the way you intended when you accepted my father's wager, but I am grateful for it nonetheless. She extended her hand formally. Goodbye, Your Royal Highness. Instead of taking her hand, he reached into his coat and produced a document, their original contract. With deliberate movements, he tore it in half, then quarters, letting the pieces fall to the marble floor. I release you from all obligations, he said, but I ask one thing in return. What is that? Time, he said simply. Not 30 days, but perhaps 30 weeks, 30 months. However long it takes for you to see me not as the man who once owned you, but as the man who loves you. Jeanette's carefully maintained composure faltered. And how would this time be spent? However you wish. You could return to London, establish yourself independently. I would court you properly, publicly. We would begin again as equals. Hope, fragile but persistent, bloomed in her chest. That would be unconventional. For the first time since she'd known him, Prince Valerius smiled fully, transforming his severe features into something almost boyish. I believe we left convention behind some time ago, Miss Ashworth. She found herself smiling in return. Perhaps we did. 1 year later, Shadowmere Keep stood transformed. Roses climbed previously barren walls, and light poured through windows that had long been shuttered. The East Wing, once forbidden and shrouded in painful memories, now housed a dozen young women, daughters of impoverished gentry and talented girls from the village, all receiving the education society had denied them. In the library, Jeanette of Aldoria, Princess of Aldoria for barely 3 months, reviewed applications for the next term's scholarships. Sunlight caught the simple gold band on her finger as she made notes in a ledger. Still working? Valerius asked from the doorway, his formal attire indicating he had just returned from London. The patronesses have sent more candidates than we can accommodate, she explained, rising to greet him. We may need to expand again. He crossed the room to kiss her, a gesture that still sent warmth through her entire being. Whatever you need. Their path to marriage had been neither direct nor easy. After leaving Shadowmere Keep on that 30th day, Jeanette had indeed gone to London, not to Emberwood Hall, where her father still drowned in drink and self-pity. With the support of the women she had written to, she established herself as an advocate for educational reform, particularly for young women from circumstances similar to her own. Lord Percival Ashworth's downfall came swiftly after the contents of Jeanette's letters became known in select circles, not through public scandal, but through the quiet withdrawal of invitations and credit that formed the lifeblood of aristocratic existence. His gambling debts were called in by everyone except Prince Valerius. Valerius had courted Jeanette with patience and humility. He attended her lectures on educational reform, donated generously to her causes, and never once presumed upon their previous connection. When he proposed again 6 months after she had left Shadowmere Keep, he did so not with grand gestures, but with a simple promise: partnership in all things. Their wedding contract, drafted by Jeanette herself and signed by both, established her control over her inheritance from her mother and guaranteed the east wing of Shadowmere Keep would forever serve as a school for young women of limited means. Lord Ashworth was seen at the club again last night, Valerius mentioned as they walked through the garden that had first brought them together. Apparently, he's telling anyone who will listen that he orchestrated our match. Jeanette laughed. Of course he is. Does it bother you that my father claims credit for the happiness he tried to sell? No. She stopped to touch a particularly vibrant rose. We know the truth of how we came to be. From ownership to partnership, Valerius murmured, drawing her close. Not at all what I expected when I accepted his wager. The best wagers are those where both parties win something unexpected, she replied, rising on tiptoe to kiss him. Above them, the windows of the east wing reflected the setting sun, each one representing a young woman whose destiny, like Jeanette's, was being rewritten, not through chance or the decisions of men, but through her own determination and strength. What had begun as 30 days of captivity had blossomed into a lifetime of purpose, passion, and true partnership.